Who is Anthony Perkins, and what do we know about him? I learned he is one of those who benefited from what has been described as a mistake by nature. Conservatively assessed, he is the handsome gentleman you see in the movies. Behind the scenes, he is a reserved fellow that cherished quiet moments, which he spent expanding his knowledge through reading and writing. His years of Hollywood fame may have been overshadowed by new facts about his love life and sexuality, which occasioned the secrecy in his romantic life. Make sure to watch the video until the end, and if you're new here, don't forget to join our wonderful community by subscribing to the Vintage Hollywood Archive channel. It is true Anthony Perkins lived a very nervous and introverted lifestyle within the social circle. He loved doing things by himself, an attitude that has been with him since he was a kid. After learning about his childhood story, I concluded that Perkins took the right decision to be part of the movie world so he could practice the bottled-up fantasies in his imagination and the ones he may have read in books. A cursory look into the career life of Anthony Perkins showed a typical tale of a Hollywood star, only that the coloration of his private life portrays him as a man who may have lived a dual love life. And he significantly tried his best to keep it undisclosed. I would say that it is no longer news that the psycho star Anthony Perkins thrived in a hide-and-seek kind of life while he was alive, owing to his queer nature. What is now the news is that for years, fans kept their ears open, hoping to see Perkins take his marital vows, but he chose to keep his distance from matrimonial living. Perhaps the need to keep his career in Hollywood, or to douse suspicions about what he knew was true, he decided to take a step of fate by marrying at the handsome gentleman of an actor who dominated the industry with his talent in the 1950s and up to the 1960s, eventually married a woman and had 2 kids. Observers say that while Alfred Hitchcock's horror classic Psycho may not be obvious in what it implied, it may have had a subtle background in strange cinema history. But that is not the issue at hand. What is more interesting to me is the circumstances it created in the life of Anthony Perkins. He achieved his greatest fame by appearing in the legendary movie. He was outstandingly famous in his act, as his charm attracted many Hollywood leading ladies. Sadly, he had his emotion intact because of a mistake made by nature in his life, his continuous struggle with his sexual preference, which tormented him like a plague. At some point, Perkins told fans how being famous got him into more trouble because it drew the enormous attention of many beautiful women that any sane mind could not have resisted. Their recurrent advances left him shaken up and scared. Of course, this fine singer became the heartthrob of many ladies, and that was one hell of a problem because his true nature inclined the other way. He was in love with other heartthrobs, especially one with Tab Hunter. Anthony Perkins' affair with Tab Hunter is today among Hollywood's best and at the same time worst kept secrets. Why and how? Their love was confirmed by Hunter in his memoir, Tab Hunter, Confidential, The Making of a Movie Star, published in 2005. His intelligence was not the only thing his partner cherished in their enduring relationship. His humor, time, and resources, according to Tab, who recalled a Christmas fun together. Tony would go with me to the barn or a show I was writing in, but he wasn't crazy about horses. Sometimes we'd head up to water ski. He wasn't the athletic type. His amusement came from his quirky, brainy charm and dry humor, Hunter stated. New York City-born Anthony Perkins began a fruitful career as a teenager in summer stock programs and may have appeared in movies uncredited before entering the professional stage. He made his film debut in The Actress, appearing alongside Spencer Tracy and Gene Simons, as put together by director George Cukor. Perkins often talked about himself as a typical mama's boy. His father, the famous theatrical performer Osgood Perkins, and his bisexual wife Janet, had him set up for this journey of livelihood. His happy childhood was cut short following his father's sad demise when he was just 5 years old, reported to have slumped and died of a heart attack while on a Broadway tour of Susan and God. With that unfortunate incident, little Perkins knew that it was time to grow fast. Did he wish his father dead, as he once hinted at while answering reporters' questions? Perhaps one of those childhood illusions left him with a new reality when the senior Perkins left humanity. Perkins hinted that he was filled with tremendous guilt that later cracked his relationship with his mother. At Brown and Nicholas, Perkins' sexuality began to develop. He was not quite a bright student, so while his schoolmates were entering Harvard University, Perkins was the only student encouraged to go to Rollins College because of his poor grade. Somehow, he had more luck in Delaware a particular summer, where he worked at the Robin Hood. This is where he met an old pal, Charles Williamson. They rekindled their friendship, lunching and swimming together during breaks. Not too long, Perkins developed a passionate love for Williamson, who has narrated how he never talked about his homosexuality during the summer. He did not act on it at all. Perkins was focused on his entertainment career. His Broadway debut in the 1954 Tea and Sympathy was a hit with his role as a sensitive adolescent that earned him lots of commendations. He continued to shine in his capacity until his agent told him that Alfred Hitchcock needed him for the famous Psycho movie. At this time, his romantic life became excruciatingly dreadful because he needed to protect his sexuality. Although he had sexual encounters with women, he described them as unsatisfying. Did they say Perkins went through intensive psychotherapy when he was 39, the same period that he began the first known romantic relationship with a woman identified as Helen Merrill? That is the way the cookie crumbles, if I must say, because this mistake must have made his life miserable, but somehow he has to keep pushing, hoping that things turn around for good. 2 years after, we heard that Perkins had taken a bold step by marrying Barry Berenson, a beautiful lady who was about 16 years younger. The couple took their marital vows in 1973, but his close friends envisaged that the union may not last long. Of course, we'd heard. He is now in marriage, Don Backerty explained. Don is a longtime man-to-man friend with Anthony Perkins. I thought that was just odd behavior. Did he think that marriage to Barry Berenson could make him a heterosexual? He queried, but it turned out the opposite because the marriage endured for a time. I have heard people say that life begins at 40, so I thought that if that statement would apply to the case of Anthony Perkins, who is now believed to have lived a double life, being that he was not a straight man from 1 to 40, and married Barry at 41, and became a seemingly conventional man for the rest of his life. Although Perkins continued to struggle within himself, which sometimes made him furious. The influence was so much, but his wife could not discern what the issue was. At a point, she was quoted to have said, "He's precise and intense. I'm much calmer," suggesting that the things she experienced at the time don't bother her. "There's a balance that keeps us together," she was quoted. Even though the marriage gave him his 2 sons, to whom he was truly devoted, Perkins was once cited to have said that his marriage became much more structured and ordinary. It became obvious that marital life made him not so grasping and ambitious. Perhaps he was paranoid or fearful. In talking about his most remarkable movie, Psycho, one argument was continued whether or not Hitchcock intentionally prepared the role he played for him because he knew his secret romantic struggle. Before appearing in that movie, most people know Perkins, but not as a queer fellow. Critics thought that there was the possibility that Perkins was given the Norman Bates role because Hitchcock knew he was an unconventional man, and must have thought that Perkins' sexuality would assist in portraying Bates' intermittent, effeminate nature. Perkins himself corroborated this opinion when he hinted that Bates' character was designed intentionally as a bisexual, and why he feared revealing his sexual inclination to society. Perkins did not see anything wrong in doing so on screen, the reason that role became a perfect one for him. Split Image, The Life of Anthony Perkins, is a remarkable publication about Perkins, put together by Charles Weinkauf. The book x-rayed the life of his great talent, particularly his serious tussles living as a queer in a society that tends to demonize persons of his kind. Now we clearly understand why it's very essential at the time for the Hollywood community to continue to see Perkins as a straight man, and not the other way, in what critics say is the first publication critically examining the dual life of a famous queer celeb. It is very unfortunate how one memorable movie can result in pigeonholing that can destroy a promising career. I learned that sometime in the early 1980s, Perkins was left with nothing to do. He only stayed afloat with aftershave adverts in Japan. That is what one Perkins male lover considered the excruciating dance of the 50s, talking about the persecution of anyone found guilty of a nature-made offense. Hence the seedy trysts in theaters and the perpetual fear in the life of actors who see themselves as victims of circumstance, and many decided to keep a sealed lip over it, or risk their career the moment they're exposed, just as they did to Tab Hunter, who unfortunately has also been fingered as among Perkins' first love interests. Like Williamson had explained, talking about the secrecy involved in how they related with each other, he was in a love relationship with Perkins, but everyone else sees them as college buddies. Anthony Perkins appeared to be an ambitious fellow who never wanted anything to stand in the way of his career or his dreams, the reason he never revealed anything to anyone about the second side of his private. I still recall the scenario that played out when he shined in the Friendly Persuasion movie. Perkins' personality was hyped by critics as the next James Dean in town, but Paramount Studios did not think so. They assumed the ambiguous nature of his sexuality was disturbing, even as fans and gossip writers continue to question his romantic allegiance to conventionality. Studio head Barney Balabin thought Perkins was exposing his affair with Tab Hunter and tried to lauder his image in a last-minute attempt to heterosexualize his identity by relocating him to dramatic potboilers, talking about Desire Under the Elms that he appeared opposite Sophie Loren. He also played in teenage romances as seen in Tall Story alongside Jane Fonda. Despite these efforts, the initial aim by Studio failed to achieve its objective, and Perkins was denied roles, leading to him missing out on West Side Story and Some Like It Hot. After Hunter met Perkins in 1956 and got smitten by each other, the two began a relationship that would last for years, until 1959 when Paramount Studio put a stop to it and attempted to reconstruct Perkins' image. This was happening before Psycho was filmed. The halt in their relationship was disheartening for Hunter, the reason he described it as a wonderful time in his life. The affair was so passionate that not even the rift created by Fear Strikes Out could finally separate them when Perkins took a role Hunter played in its TV version. Though Hunter wanted to reprise the role in the movie, no qualms since it was given to Perkins, and the relationship soared for a few more years, Hunter stated. But beyond Perkins' sexual inclination issues, he seems to be a likable fellow, tender and warm, and penetrated the heart of many ladies that every one of them desired to take him home. Years after his affair with Hunter ended, Anthony Perkins pulled through a 5-year love life with actor Grover Dale after meeting at a Broadway flop Green Willow. They were a couple until it mutually ended between them when they thought their activities were hindering their career progress. Anthony Perkins, who truly wanted to do away with his odd life, made a destiny move towards changing himself when he asked for help from a New York medic, Mildred Newman. Newman had made a bestseller publication titled How to Be Your Own Best Friend, detailing how one can change from the unusual to straight through what she described as conversion therapy. In Newman's words, some refused to accept their sexuality, kept working with them, and we've found that a homosexual who wants to change has a very good chance of doing so. For him to return to a conventional man, Newman suggested electroshock therapy, which Hunter found alarming when they two worked together on a movie set. Secondly, Newman encouraged Anthony Perkins to start having sex with women, which he rigorously followed. He was said to have met some actresses, including Victoria Principal and Barry Berenson, who became his wife. Sadly, Berenson was pregnant when Perkins was reported to have died from AIDS-related complications in 1992. Then he was 60. A family spokeswoman had said in a release that he died peacefully at his Hollywood home in the company of his wife and children, who were 16 and 18 years of age. Though the announcer acknowledged that she was uninformed of how Perkins had been sick and how or whether he contracted the AIDS virus or not, suggesting that Perkins may have kept his infection secret for about 2 years. A few days after his demise, his wife hinted that her husband decided to hide his sickness because if people knew he was infected, they would never give him work again, she said. It seems that family and only a few close friends knew about his AIDS status before his demise. Anthony Perkins is quite a nice person with a good heart. He was one of those who enjoyed a happy working relationship with Alfred Hitchcock, who was famously known for the rough handling of actors. If you want to know more about the struggles of actors in Hollywood, be sure to check out our next video. We'll be diving into the story of Tab Hunter and how he navigated the complexities of his sexuality in the film industry.